Hello, Sauce here. We've got a lesson on bar graphs and histograms. I have some data here. I could imagine I asked 16 people, how many hours per week do you play video games? And they gave us a numerical answer. We've got 16 numbers here. If we're going to make a bar graph out of this information, which is a visual presentation, then I'm going to need to categorize this numerical information. I'm going to have to change this from being numerical data to categorical data. Now, if I look at my responses here, it would be natural to choose one category to be none. And by none, we mean a response of 0. 0 hours of video games played per week. I'm going to choose a category for responses 1 to 5. I'm going to choose a category 6 to 10, 11 to 15, and 16 or more. I've chosen 5 categories to put these numbers into. And what I'm going to record is how many responses I get in each category. I've got to be careful to account for everything, so when I add up the number of people that responded with no hours of video games played, I'm going to cross out those 3 zeros and record that there are 3 people that responded in that category. How many people responded in the category of 1 to 5 hours played? I'm going to count them up and cross them off as I go. That's 1, 2, 3 responses in that category, and I'm looking over to see if I got that correct. I think so. How many responses in the category of 6 to 10 hours of video games played per week? 1, 2, 3, and 4, that 10 there. 4 people responded. 11 to 15, I've got 1, 2, 3 responses in that category, and 16 or more, 1, 2, 3, and I put a 3 there. Here I've categorized my numerical data. I've got 5 categories and the number of responses in each of those categories. I'm going to take a quick check to see that I used every number. It appears that I have. I'm ready to graph. So the first thing in setting up a graph is to make the axes and label the axes. On the horizontal axis, I'm going to put my categories. I'm going to have 5 of them. So I'm going to make tick marks to divide my horizontal axis into 5 sections, and I'm going to label each section, the first being none, the second 1 to 5, then 6 to 10, 11 to 15, and 16 or more. On the vertical axis, I'm going to make tick marks to represent the number of people that responded. My highest response is 4. I'll label that tick mark. And because 3 is so common of a response, I'm going to label that tick mark as well. And then the first one. So I have my axes ready. Now it's time to make my bars, or a bar graph or a histogram. And I'm going to start by writing the top of what's going to be my visual bar. And in the category of none, I make the top of my bar at 3. I'm going to make the next one in the category of 1 to 5. I also have the top of the bar at 3. Now here's the difference between a histogram and a bar graph. A histogram is making the vertical sides of the bars look like those bars are separate and they're separated by a gap. That's a histogram when you make it look like that. A bar graph makes the presentation look as if the bars are right up against each other. So if I have no space between these 2 bars, we call that a bar graph. And it should be pretty obvious that a bar graph and a histogram are very similar. I tend to prefer bar graphs, but students can choose how they want it to look. I'm going to continue my bar graph. In the category of 6 to 10, I'm going to draw the height at 4, and 11 to 15, the height at 3, and 16 or more, height of 3. I find it easy to draw my heights and then come back and draw the vertical parts to make the bars look distinct. To finish up, I'm going to lightly shade by cross-hatching these bars. If we were working in color, we might want to color the bars different colors to separate them visually. But this is sufficient here. And we have finished our graph. Taking a look at this graph, the heights of the bars are very similar. The data does not show a lot of difference between the number of people that responded in these categories.